Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Travis King at Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Chris Storer, VP of Marketing at CareCentrix. Chris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
Of course. So today you're going to be sharing a lot of value with us, and you're going to touch on insourcing versus outsourcing the marketing functions, collaboration with a distributed workforce, and 8 dimensions of a marketing campaign. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share with listeners a little bit about yourself and what you and the team at CareCentrix are up to these days.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, I'm a traditional marketer. I definitely began my career in ad agency and PR firms, typically boutique, before joining the kind of great expansion into digital health in the late 2000s, working with a company called American Well, which is a telemedicine company, a startup called Twine Health, which was acquired by Fitbit, and now with CareCentrix. So it's definitely an exciting time in healthcare. There still is loads of opportunity for advancement and innovation in technology, and not just in the kind of medical device and pharma area, but really leveraging intelligence and sensors and understanding about people to promote better health, kind of regardless of where they are. And our organization focuses on those typically who are older and may have complex chronic conditions and really do need a lot of healthcare assistance. And so we help those people heal and age at home with the assistance of folks that we bring to their house versus having them go to a place to receive care. So happy to share about the organization that we're working to build within CareCentrix, on the marketing team especially, and really try to share some insights of things that have gone right, maybe things that haven't gone so right, and folks who are looking to take that next step to really build an internal organization to support the company's marketing efforts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that background and giving the listeners some context. I found that super helpful. So yeah, if without further ado, let's just dive in. So first, could you share with us a little bit about how you've built up your marketing department from scratch? So you touched a little bit on like insourcing, outsourcing when we chatted prior.
Sure.
So definitely would love to hear a little bit more detail about that.
Yeah, I think every marketing organization kind of goes through, as the company grows and as the demands of the team grow, the ebb and flow of needs for internal versus external resources. Typically, obviously, smaller organizations try to maintain lean overhead, and so they'll lean more on outside resources as needed. And as that responsibility grows and the expertise is needed in-house versus from an agency partner, being able to build that team into a kind of a dynamic and growing part of the organization. So I recently at CareCentrix, a similar situation where going through a high growth point, had relied previously on a lot of agency partners, but really looking to bring that expertise in house. And part of the reason is to be able to focus on building a unique skill set for the organization that we have. We sell to large healthcare organizations, and therefore we have a pretty finite customer base. And therefore, we are looking to do kind of specific targeted marketing, but really taking into consideration the value proposition that we bring, the different persona that we're working with within these organizations. And it does get to be a bit more complex where we can't really just kind of plug in an agency so well that doesn't have that succinct background within the realm of the organization to understand that context. So we're really looking to have a team internally that can manage a good 85 to 90% of the work, and then outsource that 10 to 15% where is needed. And again, kind of thinking about the ebb and flow of the team, where as the team grows, then that also creates opportunities to explore new and different areas, whether that's with video or whether that's some other content strategy that you need those other resources until they get to the point where it makes sense to bring them in-house. But, it's, I think for a lot of folks thinking about building their teams, it can be kind of maddening to think about, all right, well, what's the best way to do this? And just, recognize the fact that there's a kind of best way for a moment in time and really try to maximize the return of your investment on resources, whether it's a partner or an internal resources. But especially for those organizations that are struggling with, complex industries and topics, bringing resources in-house can really, it can be pretty life-changing in terms of the ability to quickly get content out there that's hyper-relevant to your customer.
I love that. And one more quick question on that topic. What's been the hardest or the biggest hurdle that you've come across with, doing such a build out?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I maybe thought the hardest was versus what kind of became the hardest. We are in an interesting time where the unemployment rate is very low. So talent is pretty scarce. And I'm sure like many people, it seems like, the calls from, recruiters sometimes never stop. And that can make it hard to differentiate in the market as an employer. And so I expected to go through a kind of a significant amount of time coming through resumes and interviewing. And was very shocked that we were able to fill all of our positions inside a month that we had open. So that was certainly good news, which I did think was going to be the hardest, and trying to keep the car moving down the road at the same time. One of the kind of the bigger challenges is unwinding and dialing back some of the external resources and working through contracts and all sorts of different iterations, especially as relationships have been developed over the course of years and different people worked on different contracts. So you don't have a lot of the same standardized language. So, making sure to both be respectful of partners and giving them obviously the due time, a lot of the contract that we have to provide a termination, but, really also making that work within the time and budget constraints that we all have, and not having too many overlapping resources at the same time. So that's also being new in an organization, figuring out the budgeting process. That stuff does take a significant amount of time to dive into. But yeah, it's kind of more painless across the board than I probably thought it would have been.
Got it. No, thanks so much for sharing that detail. And I guess that leads me to my next question. In terms of, collaboration with a distributed workforce, do you think that had a little bit to do with your success in finding a team, within, a month's time? Because that, to be honest, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think so. And it also attracts, I found, at least in this experience, it does attract a certain kind of person who has, in the experience of the candidates that we've hired, have had the, working in an office experience for a good amount of time. And, work from home type of job is what they're looking for. So I think to your point, that really does have a pretty big impact. So it's fortunate that we do have a culture that has, as a company, we have about 2,200 employees, and many of them are remote employees. That certainly does help. That's an incentive that not everybody can provide. So, not a non-monetary incentive, which is interesting. But, by having employees really scattered around the country, obviously trying to make that the collaboration work, is something that it has to be a cognizant part of what the team does. And so one of the things that we implement, so one is we do a quarterly on-site meeting where we'll all come together as a team in a location. We certainly do have, obviously, regular weekly and team calls, but we also are in the process of implementing a project management software. A lot of folks are probably familiar with many of these, like on money.com or Basecamp or whatever it might be. But utilizing a tool to make those kind of one-off questions as easy as it is to lean over and ask somebody. So to know the status of something or the due date or whatever it might be, just to make it easier for everybody to be on the same page, we believe will improve the kind of the speed and efficiency of transferring that information, but also to make it easier to focus on some of the bigger challenges that we're working on, not simply kind of transferring due dates, et cetera. So, I think really, again, having a distributed workforce where you're not meeting face to face, you in a lot of ways have to try to force that collaboration in order to make it more natural. So kind of genetically modifying it to be that way. But I do think it's really important for people because it's a nice opportunity to get great talent wherever people are located. But you really do have to get to nurture that the essence of the team in order to get that net benefit from it.
Got it. And has there been anything that you found that's like kind of been in your secret sauce of keeping, teams that are in multiple locations together, like whether it be, a Slack channel or whether it be, funny emails that they send to each other? Or, I mean, you mentioned Monday, but is there anything else besides, that tool that you use to keep everyone connected?
So, it's interesting. And this really does stem from the top of our organization. And this is really, our CEO's name is John Driscoll. And he leads by example with this because he's dealing with it just as much as anybody else of having a distributed workforce. And he's candid and personable. And one of the values of CareCentrix is we take our work seriously, not ourselves. And I think that has to be part of it. You have to kind of let your guard down a little bit and really just, try to make it not just about the topic at hand because you don't have those opportunities for kind of water cooler talk or whatever it might be. And I also think there's certainly a personality match. I think marketing is probably unique in having people who are probably more outgoing than not, and maybe makes it a little bit easier than it would for other types of workforces. But you definitely have to find the right mix of people who are willing to put themselves out there in order to benefit from that kind of remote type of connectivity. So it has much to do with the people, I think, as it does the resources. So really thinking about that is core during as you're trying to build up that team.
I love that. And I feel like I saw somewhere that he stopped or froze some sort of pay and helped raise funds for people on the team. Is that real?
Yeah, he froze the pay of with their agreement. It wasn't like it was
right. He didn't just cut them off.
A dictator in this. They all agreed. The top 20 executives froze their pay in order to double the pay of I think it was the bottom 500 workers or so, bringing them up to a minimum wage of $15 an hour. 6 years ago, I think at this point, which is now, federal governments and state governments are finally getting around to moving towards that.
Right.
Yeah. He definitely leads by example. He was actually just recently at a coalition that was at the G7 summit called the Business for Inclusive Growth. And it was quite a few European and some American companies that were, pressing for favorable environments to build a culture that rewards employees just at a much fairer rate than kind of traditionally. And so, you start to embrace these concepts of, is capitalism what's going to lead to the, a 21st century economy, the staying power. He uses a term called moral capitalism, but it's, I think, it's interesting to have a CEO who's that involved in a global stage in dialogues about things that are really pressing business matters. And we even saw with the the business group came out with their, many of them signed a recommendation for the business or the purpose of a corporation, and that is responsible to all its stakeholders. But it's easy to sign a document, but actually putting that into action and saying we're going to actually make this a company that really does care about its employees, where everybody can benefit, is it's quite inspiring.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, I'd really, really value the collaboration and, John leading by example and showing leaders, the way to, build it from the top down. But then also, you're also doing that in the day to day with your team. So definitely love that collaboration you guys got going on over there.
Yeah, thanks.
Today's growth story is about a brand we all know well, Airbnb. When they were trying to maximize growth among work travelers, Airbnb knew they needed to develop and execute a content strategy to reach multiple personas at different stages of the customer journey. Enter Hub and Spoke Marketing. Hub and Spoke managed creative content development and crafted a custom publishing process that allowed Airbnb to develop more content in less time. The end result? A lot of content across multiple channels, all strategically nurturing leads through to conversion. Within the first 6 months, Airbnb nearly tripled the number of companies enrolled in their Airbnb for Work program. They also saw huge increases in user adoption, with work travelers booking longer stays and more guests per booking. If you're looking for strategic content at scale, I've got a hunch Hub and Spoke can help. Head over to hubspoke.marketing/growth to schedule your consultation with a content specialist today. That's hubspoke.marketing/growth. All right, let's get back to the show.
Let's transition a little bit into, I know prior we also chatted a little bit about your 8-dimensional marketing campaign that you kind of run as a framework. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I think that you can take any kind of marketing campaign and break it out into these 8 core buckets. And the reason even to talk about it is to help give people a framework, again, in the sense of collaboration, help them give them a framework of working together and what pieces of the campaign that they're all working together on. They're all important. And so it's not saying that there's a pyramid here and that the top part is more important than the second tier and the third tier, et cetera. But really to get people to lock arms around what their contribution is to the overall campaign. So the 8 dimensions just that we look at, this could certainly be variable for other folks, but we look at the campaign type. So that's a branding campaign, product, lead gen, nurture, ABM, and we'll talk about that a little later. Corporate communications and PR. Then there's the theme, which is obviously the key message and the call to action. The type, which is the type of content. Distribution type, whether it's email, social, ads, direct. The voice, which is a very important one that I think a lot of people miss. Is this the voice of the company? Is this the voice of the CEO? Is this voice of sales, marketing, other subject matter experts? Because that really does matter. Thinking about the audience. So obviously sales personas are really important, but looking at other industry insiders like consultants and analysts, investors, et cetera. The timeline. So, as we think about campaigns, we obviously think in terms of a kind of a bit of a curve of, before, during, and after. What's going to happen kind of going into the campaign. Maybe it's a conference, we're going to do some pre-promotion, what's going to happen during the campaign. And those are all the different social activities, the advertising, live tweets, et cetera. And then following the campaign. And then finally is performance. And that's really making sure to set KPIs and goals for each campaign so we can, have a benchmark of how we performed and measure it against past results. And I think by breaking it down into these simple buckets, it allows people to say, okay, well, I'm working on this piece and I'm working on that piece, and there will be some natural collaboration in a lot of these areas. But it really just provides a kind of scaffolding for people to build campaigns together. And I think it really does help a team.
Love that. That's super valuable. I think always for me, having a framework to start anything is always like how I love starting, because someone has already done it before. You found success doing it. So why not take the framework and just apply it and mold it to your needs? So I definitely really love that dimensional approach. Anything else on the dimensions before we wrap up and you share with listeners, what you're learning or working on?
No, ready to go.
Awesome. So B2B growth has always been about highlighting tactics and strategies B2B leaders can apply to their own teams in order to achieve explosive growth. So, Chris, could you share with us, a marketing strategy that your team is currently, trying or thinking about in the future, or even trying right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're actually just getting ready to kick off a pilot of an account-based marketing approach. And for those folks that kind of are new to account-based marketing, it's really thinking about organizations that are right in your wheelhouse. So those that meet an ideal customer profile, but maybe haven't had success with from a traditional sales standpoint of outreach, and maybe emails not email marketing or other types of marketing really just haven't hit the mark with that group yet. So it's sitting down and looking at the organization in a holistic way. So certainly looking at whatever profile of the organization you have to identify where the value proposition might hit most for whatever product or service that we want to highlight. Thinking about who within the organization we are aware of and how much they know us or have interacted with us in the past. So it's looking at your personas and mapping actual individuals in an organization to those personas. And then certainly looking at your CRM to understand, what sort of interaction you've had with them in the recent past. And then also filling in gaps where we don't have context in a certain persona. And then leveraging content, and certainly existing content and new content, to develop a communication strategy for a set of individuals, and really thinking about their organization, thinking about the things that they may be struggling with or are opportunities for us to help them with their business, and really making a best effort on all channels that make sense. And that's everything from email to sales calls to direct mail to targeted advertising, and maybe even at a conference geo-targeting, and really just thinking about how do we influence these folks as they are along their prospecting journey. And one of the things I mentioned earlier about the voice of the piece in healthcare, that becomes pretty important, because you do have significant influence for different parts of the organization based on a type of skill set. So like a physician, for instance, typically comes with obviously some understanding of credentials and experience and everything, and using that voice to make a statement, whether it might be you're targeting a CFO at an organization, there's still value in that clinical voice to provide some sort of credibility to the argument that this is good for their organization, even if they're really they're going to be concerned more about the bottom line. Being able to use that medical voice, that expertise to deliver the validity that we're looking for is really important. And then, of course, working with sales to share this information. So as we roll out an ABM campaign around a client, we'll share regular updates about who's doing what are the interesting bites that we're seeing. Are they picking up on one value proposition versus another? And then certainly, looking at how to, provide an ongoing structure for those folks to be, regularly nurtured. So it's, in the spirit of collaboration, this also obviously then requires not just among the marketing team, but among in our case, we have a sales and sales strategy team, as well as other subject matter experts in the organization that we want to leverage their credibility to bring specific and unique messages to these different folks that we're looking to influence. So it's exciting. It's fun to be able to kick it off. It really does intersect from everything. Like I said, this could be old school direct mail through to retargeting to other direct online advertising channels. But it really, it spans kind of the whole gamut of opportunities to use marketing techniques that obviously have been proven in other ways in just a really hyper-targeted way. So I'm excited to see how this goes and how the organization embraces it.
Love it. I love that. This has been such a great conversation, Chris, and really appreciate you diving deep on your, what you're executing as far as an ABM approach is going, because I think that's something really important, and a lot of marketers are going to start implementing that more and more, definitely in the near future. And as we wrap up, if listeners want to stay connected with you or follow up to ask any other questions on this topic or anything that you shared, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk.
Got it. So you heard that, guys. Reach out to Chris on LinkedIn if you guys have any follow-up questions. And with that, thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks a lot, Travis. Nice talking to you. Take care.
You as well.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.